Okay. So we can start?
Yeah, I'm meeting people. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the final stakeholder forum of the Green Deal Data Space project. My name is Nevena Ratsko, and I'm a project manager at IDC Government Consulting Unit. Our project, our unit is responsible for the project management of the Green Deal Data Space. So we gathered here today to close a cycle or a series of events that we started to organize in the second phase of the project. Some of you may have joined, for instance, the stakeholder forum that we organized about biodiversity, or the one that we had about climate change adaptation, or even the last one, which was about zero pollution action plan. So I'm very happy to see such a high number of participants. It's a great outcome from the tremendous work that my colleagues, Veronica and Francesca, were leading from ours. They have been responsible to drive the work on the community of practice. So I'm super happy to have a big community here. And the idea is, what is the goal of today's meeting? What do we want to achieve? So we thought that it would be very nice to hear for the last time officially your input, your feedback about the work that we did since the very beginning of the project, and just to hear your views. How did you understand what we have been doing, and to understand if you have any kind of feedback that you want to share with us. So the setup, or what we planned, is that we try to make this forum as interactive as possible. You will see throughout the event that there will be some pop-up windows. So the idea is that up to your best knowledge, you would answer those questions or those surveys that we will launch. And then we would try to include or implement some of the inputs that we received from you. So I really would like to encourage all of you to answer those questions, or in case you would like to share something in addition, to use the chat function. So we will be monitoring also the chat to see your comments and inputs throughout the event. And overall, yes, the idea is just to hear from our community of practice. So with no further ado, I will just guide you through super quickly on the agenda, and then we can really jump into the core of this forum. So when I will stop speaking, you will hear more from our policy officer from DG Connect, Johan Bodenkamp. He will share some opening remarks regarding the event and also the overall project. Then your host, Sebastian Denville from ECFWF, will take over the leadership, and he will present the so-called Green Deal Data Space assumptions and also the implementation roadmap. You may have heard, obviously, if you have been following the project, that we built our project around 3 key pillars. So we will also zoom into the technical blueprint, to the governance and business models, and lastly, we will also discuss the high priority data sets. You can see on the agenda that we have left some time for closing remarks and also for some last Q&A. So idea is that we will just wrap up and summarize the discussion that we will have today, and then also we will share some final updates about the future of this project. So I will stop here, and I would like to call Johan on our virtual stage to join and to share his opening remarks. Thank you.
Many thanks, Nevena. I hope you can all hear me. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here at the last Green Deal Data Space Stakeholder Forum. So indeed, my name is Johan Bodenkamp, and I'm the Commission Project Officer of the GREAT project. Now, as said already by Nevena, this is the final stakeholder forum to hear and exchange about the important preparatory work that the GREAT project has been doing until now, and all this will be laying the basis for the Green Deal Data Space. So your feedback and endorsement of the Green Deal Data Space vision and the roadmap towards its implementation is going to be vital, because indeed, creating successful data spaces can only work if the stakeholders are involved from the very, very beginning. So the active integration and participation of data holders and users is a must in data space endeavors. This will ensure that a data space is going to be designed and structured to meet the needs of the stakeholders and will make the data space actually relevant. So, as you probably know, the creation of the Green Deal data space is part of a huge and bold vision that was set out by the European Commission in the 2020 European Data Strategy. And this vision was and still is to gradually create an internal market for data where data can flow safely across sectors and borders in line with EU rules and values. Now, in order to realize this vision, common European data spaces are currently being established in order to facilitate trusted and secure data pooling, sharing, and reuse in 14 strategic economic sectors and domains of public interest. And the Green Deal, obviously, is one of those 14 domains. Now, these common European data spaces will gradually be interconnected and in that way form an important pillar of this so-called single market for data that we are all trying to establish. And all this should make data more easily accessible, findable, and will in the end allow for the development of more data-driven products, services, as well as evidence-based policies across the EU. Now, with the entry into force just a few days ago of the Data Act, to be precise, on the 11th of January, the second key legislative data initiative of the data strategy has been delivered. And together with the new Data Governance Act of last year, as well as existing data legislation, such as the Open Data Directive and the new Implementing Act on High Value Datasets, and of course the important GDPR, all this forms a robust legal basis for trustful and fair data access and sharing in Europe. Now, of course, there's no one size fits all structure for all the common European data spaces. Each space is to be organized by its stakeholders, and it should take into account the unique characteristics of the specific sector or domain. So in this case, the transversal domain of the Green Deal and the specific objectives that are to be reached by the Green Deal. However, one can say that for all the common European data spaces, there are two key elements that are shared by all of them, which is that they bring together, on the one hand, relevant data infrastructures, and on the other, the governance frameworks, so as to, in a clear way, be able to understand the rules and access data for sharing, pooling, etc., and reuse. Now, only last week, 24 January, a second so-called staff working document has been published and transmitted by the Commission to European Council and Parliament on data spaces, and this provides an overview of the current status of the common European data spaces. You maybe remember that a first staff working document was, at the request of European Council, prepared in February 2022, and this is a follow-up document that shows the progress that has been made in these 2.5 years. And of course, whereas significant advancements have been achieved, the pace of the progress varies, which is totally normal, of course, because the situation in the various sectors and domains is different. So whereas some data spaces, such as the Green Deal data space, are now ending the preparatory stages, specifically here now with the GREAT project, in other data spaces, deployment actions have already started. Now, I will put the link of the staff working document in the chat box so that you can hopefully have a look and see what's the state of play of the various data spaces. And of course, the Green Deal data space is part of it. Now, in order to build on the important preparatory work that has been delivered by GREAT and that they will present again in this last stakeholder forum, a follow-up Green Deal data space deployment action will be published very soon for the Digital Europe program, to be precise, coming 13 February. Now, this is an 8 million simple grant action, which will be open until the end of May. And this deployment action is to be should build on the preparatory work done by GREAT. So this deployment action, of course, is expected to really concretely deploy a technical infrastructure and a governance mechanism for the Green Deal data space, together with some related use cases. Now, if we are to realize this bold vision of establishing a single market for data with well-functioning and interconnected data spaces, among which the Green Deal data space, again, it is crucial to ensure strong commitment of all of you, that is to say the stakeholders, the data holders and users, that they are involved in the development of the various data spaces. And therefore, I thank you for being present here today for the very last and final stakeholder forum of the important GREAT project that is, as you know, preparing these first important keystones, building stones for the Green Deal data space. So thanks again for being present. I hope there will be fruitful discussions and indeed endorsement of the work prepared and presented now by the GREAT project team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan. So thank you for this very nice introduction. You have set the scene perfectly. And so now I will go and share my screen and hopefully we'll guide you through the presentation. So I have seen some messages stating that my internet connection was a bit unstable. So I know that it will be fine. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Is that the screen that starts with the Green Deal Data Space Final Stakeholder Forum?
Yes, it's just not in presentation mode, but I think we see
yeah.
the right presentation. Okay, now it's good.
Okay, so let's jump into it. And so, no, sorry, that's not the right one. Okay, I need to stop sharing. And yeah, excuse me.
Maybe when you upload your presentation, Sebastian, we could have a short round of the warm-up question from our tool that we'll be using today, just to introduce you, everybody, to the tool we're using today. It's pretty straightforward, so I don't think we will have any problems. But as we mentioned already in the chat, we would like to ask you a few questions today, as is the endorsement, the final feedback gathering. We will be launching questions to you today in this format that you can see now in the screen. It's anonymous, so you can really let us know where you are today. You won't be tracked. But please see if that works for you. If you can see the question, if you can respond to it. If I hope it's visible. I see only 15 of you responded, and we have 90 people. So I will give you just a moment to see if you can see it in on your screen, and if you can vote. This is the format we will be using throughout the event today. So it will pop up on your screen and it will stay there unless you respond. So it's nice if you can give us your feedback. This is just a warm-up question that we know it works for you and you know how to use it. And we will be launching batches of questions for each of the presentations you're going to see. So there will be a batch dedicated to the technical blueprint, then to data governance and business models, and then to data sets, and at the end to our overall vision for the Green Deal data space. So I see it's only 52 of you who responded, so still 40 people. So a few of you, I'll give you just a moment to see if you can see it on your screen. If you see it somewhere, it should be a part of the Zoom layout. So you should see it as a pop-up in the center of your screen. So thank you very much for that. And then I am able to know where you're connecting from today. So thank you very much for that. We have people from Poland, Brussels, Italy. Thank you very much from home as well, because some of us are at home still. But thank you very much for sharing that. That's how it will work today, and I'm happy that it works for all of you. And now, Sebastian, you are ready with your presentation. I'm passing it on back to you.
Indeed. So thank you, Veronica, for jumping in. And yes, because today, I mean, what are we up to today? It's really to give you a flavor of what the Green Deal data space could be. give you a flavor and of the really the guiding principles that have driven our efforts towards building the roadmap for the implementation of the Green Deal data space, but also getting ready to hear your thought about it. So that's why the Menti question that the Zoom the Zoom survey that will appear are really important for us, because that's really one of our major tools to be able to adapt our work so far. So later last year, we have been delivering the first version of some of our deliverables. So it includes the technical blueprint that we will hear about today, the governance and business models, and the high priority data set. So you will hear about all those things today, including the roadmap, but we will have a second round of deliverable in like 2 or 3 months from now. And we really want to adapt and to adjust according to what we will hear from you. And so to start with, we thought it would be important to give you the basic assumptions and definition that we have been working with all those months. So for the Green Deal data space himself, so that's sort of the compact definition that we came up with. So it's a collaborative and inclusive ecosystem supported by shared data infrastructure and governance frameworks. It offers an open environment for participation and ensuring secure and privacy-preserving data handling. With clear and transparent access rules and a robust governance mechanism, it upholds EU regulations and prioritizes fair access and encourages data sharing for the benefit of sustainable development and innovation. The technical blueprint is the high-level architectural framework describing how to build the Green Deal data space and how existing and planned data ecosystems can be connected to provide an interoperable, secure data sharing environment which allows seamless discovery and use of available data. Our next pillar, the governance and business mechanism. So governance here is the process for making decisions about an entity, the entity being here the Green Deal data space. So the governance board, it is about choosing the questions that must be decided, and governance supports the business model of the data space itself and participants as well, supporting also the participants, be it data providers, data users, service providers, including data intermediaries. And so it supports all those actors by making decisions that enable each party to receive value from other participants in the data space or to generate new value that can be shared. For the high priority data sets, so this is an expandable set of data sets and data services enabling key use cases required for the achievement of the European Green Deal objectives. And now the last two definitions and assumptions. Data holders, a legal person, including public sector bodies and international organizations, or a natural person who is not a data subject with respect to the data in question, which, in accordance with applicable union or national law, has the right to grant access to or to share certain personal data or non-personal data. And finally, the minimum viable Green Deal data space. The object, the roadmap should be, the implementation of the roadmap should be able to establish shortly. So this minimum viable Green Deal data space include essential components to initiate data collaboration and sharing within the scope of the Green Deal objectives. So this is a basic infrastructure, establishing a foundational digital infrastructure to facilitate data pooling, access, and sharing. Governance framework, implementing a simple yet effective governance framework that align with EU rules and values. A participation framework, so creating an open place that allows diverse organizations and individuals to participate, contribute, and benefit from the data space. But also pilot initiatives. So launching pilot initiatives aligning with Green Deal objectives, to test the viability of the data space and gather valuable insight for further development. So we need to kickstart a process that step after step will evolve towards a better and more efficient Green Deal data space. So the work has been undertaken here. The work I'm presenting has been also possible thanks to the contribution of many partners. So you can see them there. Our stakeholders has been also very important all along the process, and I want to thank them for that, because what I'm presenting today is only possible because all of those actors has been doing their work. So as you know, you have seen that many times. I think at the beginning of the project, we focused on those strategic Green Deal actions because we needed some scope to be able to progress. So the 2030 biodiversity strategy, the zero pollution action plan, and the climate change and adaptation strategy. So for the Green Deal data space, the Green Deal, before and foremost, maybe, is a policy. And this policy have objectives. So this has been one of our tasks, is to review the binding targets objectives of the Green Deal policies. And there are quite many of them, about 80 or 100 even, depending on how you define the binding targets. So I will drive you through a few examples, and then we'll try to explain what we want to do from those binding targets. So for example, for the urban ecosystem, so no net loss of green urban space by 2030, and an increase in the total area covered by green urban space by 2040 and 2050. One of the binding targets as well is to say we need 8 million more trees in Europe by this horizon. And as you can imagine, there are many ways to add 8 million trees. So that's also where having a Green Deal data space, having a place where we can monitor, we can try to understand how to shape, we can perform what-if scenario, we can connect with other initiatives that enable us to do what-if scenario is a possible way forward. One other example, this time for agriculture, is increasing the grassland butterflies and farmland birds. And the point here is really interesting because it's also in between biodiversity and climate change adaptation and mitigation. Because interestingly, butterflies are the marker of high quality soil and ground. And it appears through the scientific literature that high quality soil and ground are way more effective to capture carbon. So it's really a win-win situation. But at the same time, being able to track those butterflies, it's really hard. There are many different places in Europe that could act as a proxy for those, but you need quite a lot coverage to be able to, and quite many actors involved to be able to track that appropriately. Another example with the marine ecosystems, one of the binding targets is to restore marine habitat and to have species such as seagrass beds that would thrive way better than they are currently in the future. And the last example, there could be much more, the river connectivity. So we need at least 25,000 kilometers that are restored to a free-flowing state by 2030. It's good for biodiversity, but again, for adaptation and mitigation to climate change, very good, because free-flowing rivers are very likely to be much less destructive when there are heavy rains and associated flooding. So a very important target to mitigate the impact of those floods due to extreme events like heavy precipitation. And so the list goes on. And what is interesting to see, so here it's one example based on the butterfly index where we can see that, okay, here we have an indicator that uses a large number of data sets but the data set are not tracked by this dashboard. And we can see that the indicator is steadily going down from the left to the right over time. And for those indicators and the binding targets, it's also interesting to see that some of them, some of those indicators can be backed by a scientific consensus, but some don't. Like, for example, for pollution, to be able to properly define those indicators can be controversial. So you have indicators, some of them having a scientific consensus, some of them being more controversial and still in needs of more research. And then the data themselves that will feed those indicators. Some of those data are available, openly available from public sectors. Some of those data are in the end of private sectors that use them for other purposes. And sometimes, those data are just not available easily, and impairing reproducibility or even review of the different techniques. So based on those facts, we thought that those binding targets could be a way to initiate the very first effort and development of the Green Deal data space, so that there will be room to establish many partnerships, many collaboration to be able to gather the necessary information to define and make visible those binding targets. And then about the roadmap principles. So we had discussion after discussion, meeting after meeting, a few bold claims appeared in our discussion. So the first one here is that creating a Green Deal data space, it's more than just assembling the necessary resources. It's more than that. We need that. We need resources, but it's more than just that. Also, it's more than the construction of a sophisticated and technically impeccable data space. It will be important. We need the technicalities to work very well, but there is more. There is more to it. And really, so that's why the stakeholder forum is important. That's why the next steps are important, is that the crux of the matter really lies in rallying support. And Johan Bodenkamp mentioned that it needs to be really at the core of the reactor of those data space to be able to listen to and to take consideration of the users of those data space. And so the human factor must not be underestimated. And this will appear in the roadmap as a consequences. And bold claim, it needs to be people-centric, so that we need to consistently and constantly as well align the future state solution of that Green Deal data space with the perspectives and preferences of the individuals who will interact with it. So it has been also our experience, and maybe it's your experience as well, when we try something for the first time, we give it some time to see if it really is what we need or not. And at some point we make the decision. And if the decision is no, it's not good for me, you won't come back to it until a very long time. So that moment when individuals, organizations, initiatives come and try to invest and to contribute to the Green Deal data space, that moment is really important. And it really needs to be a high quality moment, if you want. Is that, it needs to be responsive, it needs to go at the right pace, people need to feel they have the support that they need, they need to feel that what they are doing is impactful. So this is really fundamental. And then, this being said, for the roadmap principles, we worked with those two ideas. So to have two terms, very important, pilot and trial, to be able to co-design and co-construct what will be the Green Deal data space. So in a trial, the activities will be conducted to verify the functionality of a system. The correct functionality is still the primary interest. We need the technicalities to work and to work well, because there are many, many challenges related to that. But then the pilots will be fundamental, because it will be the execution of a trial, including business relationship assumptions and exemplifying a contemplated added value for the end user of a product or service, but also for the data provider as well, so that every participant needs to see a value in contributing to this effort. And to provide some structure for developing concrete plans, we have identified clusters. And we would like to have pilots within all of those clusters, and maybe to have some pilots across clusters. And here, what we mentioned, they really serve as illustrative examples, and they provide insight into potential future pilot projects. So there are two categories. Some can be seen more as vertical clusters. Verticals can be seen as a bit simplistic here, but it's useful to think about that and to use it as concept to then develop the pilot. So the biodiversity cluster will be one, the zero pollution cluster, the climate change cluster, and recently, and after discussion, for the second phase, we are going to update what we have been doing, including also a circular economy cluster. Because all the binding targets that I've been mentioning, at the end of the day, will be the result of how circular our economy can be. So in a way, the more circular we are, the better the indicator for those three strategic actions. So those four clusters, and then more horizontal initiatives, flagship initiatives, a large program run by the EU, and another very important data infrastructure project. So we could list the Destination Earth ecosystem cluster, the Copernicus Services ecosystem cluster that has been there for quite a while, and that will be really fundamental to this activity, that the Europe's Eyes on Earth, so very, very relevant here. And also many other horizontal data initiatives like EMATNet, the marine data infrastructure, Eurostat, and all the statistics that they can provide, GRC, and many others that will be able to contribute to this. So now this slide, this is the high-level roadmap that we have been proposing during the phase one, and that we will review by the end of our project in April. And so if I start from the top of the picture, according to the current timelines, and according to the Digital Europe program current state, the implementation of the Green Deal data space should start Q1 2025 for 3 years, having different sequences of objectives. So this is a classical view for a high-level strategic roadmap. So here at the top, from the left to the right, so you start with your initial state, you have a target state at the end of the project that you want to reach, and you define some KPI that somehow measures how far you are from your target state. Our KPI will be multi-categorial, multi-dimensional, but in a way will boil down to two categories: trials, technicalities needs to work, including business and including governance and business model that will have also their processes. And so the infrastructure and the minimum viable Green Deal data space needs to work technically, the technical engineering, but also the social engineering, and the pilot. We need several pilots that will pave the landscape that we are trying to address, and they will have to be able to demonstrate added value for all the participants. Those will be the KPI. Of course, we could discuss quite some time about how to define those, but yeah, we need those to measure how far we are from our target. And then we will have the pillar and their activity. So here you can see by color where we can see risks, and when we think that if the previous steps has been done correctly, where there will be less risk. So we have the three pillars that we have been working with in our project, the governance and business model that will transition from maybe more of a commission-driven initiatives towards a governance body that will be able to fulfill its role. The high-value data set, we will start with what has been identified so far, and we will grow depending on the pilots and the priorities that will appear during the project. Of course, all the use cases, all the pilots that will work with us, that will work with the implementation in the future will have an impact. The technical blueprints, that's a high-level architecture. There is, I don't think, not so much debate about that. There is also the DSSC, the Data Space Support Center, providing highlight and insight on how to do this. There are already quite many examples in Europe and in the rest of the world on how to do that. We see that as a more streamlined activity. Now it's really about the orchestration of all these that will be important. And then two very important activities. One is onboarding and one is delivery. So onboarding first. If you look at the hyperscaler, Amazon, Google, and others, they have a very strong activity about user support and participation framework. So when you approach them, you will straight away have access to a group of individuals that will be able to listen to you. Okay, what is it that you want to do? How do you want to do it? What is your experience? What kind of investment do you want to make? Is that something small that you want to start with, or do you already have big plans? And depending on that, they will guide you through already existing work, guidelines, know-how that you can reuse. And that's absolutely key to be able to have a good participation, a participation that lasts, and also to be able to have a thriving community within the Green Deal data space. So that's why this is high risk, because this needs to be done really well so that anyone approaching the Green Deal data space can be very efficient at trying, failing, deciding, and trying again. So this is important. And for the delivery, this will be the establishment of the foundation of the Green Deal data space, its operational foundation. And of course, that will be a very critical moment, so that after that, once the foundation are laid down, you can build quickly. But if your foundation are flaky, then of course you will just pay your debt quarter after quarter, year after year, and it will slow you down easily. So very important. And when you think about a roadmap, that's typically many parallel activities going on to be able to reach the mainstream. So here we have two different scenarios. On the left, many parallel activities that we will have to manage, that the Green Deal data space will have to manage. So it can be the pilots, many pilots running at the same time, having impact on the reference data sets that we need to have having an impact on the business models and how it relates on the technicalities. There will be flow of money in those data space, because it's really sharing your data on your own terms, not only open data, but commercial data as well. So we will have to manage that complexity. So on the left-hand side, many parallel activities converging towards the mainstream. And on the right-hand side, a more simpler to manage roadmap where things just click together easily. So I hope we will be, I hope the Green Deal data space will be in between at the moment of implementation. But I just wanted to highlight that's also something important and something very difficult that we are trying to achieve. So we need to be mindful that we might be in between those situations. Now I think I have 5 more minutes to to go before the question and the feedback. So again, some of the principles that we have been following, and also sort of an illustration of what the Green Deal data space could be. So first, policy align, to make sure that the data integration efforts align with national and international policies related to environmental conservation and climate action, because this is what the Green Deal is about. Governance and sharing agreements, so very important from the onset. So promote the development of governance frameworks, define roles, responsibilities, and agreements between participants. Collaborative research project. So that's also about participation. There are already in Horizon Europe many projects, research projects that are running, funded by the European Commission. And we think it would be really useful to be able to formalize cooperation with those, because they have a lot to bring in. And as I mentioned, not everything is making scientific consensus in the way we can measure how close or not we are from those Green Deal binding targets. Data discovery and catalogs. This will be one of the first tasks to achieve during implementation, to be able to have data discovery platform or catalog that index data set from both vertical and horizontal ecosystems that I talked about, making it easier to locate relevant data. This is really one of the first steps. Again, on the technicalities, data harmonization tools. So invest in those tools on the data layer side, so that we can align data from different ecosystems to make the integration more efficient and more easy. We need places to do those harmonization, so we need resources. As we mentioned earlier, this is not enough, but we will need to be able to use that kind of platform that can aggregate, harmonize, and provide access to data from various sources. And this is my last slide. It's also about incentivizing and recognizing the effort that individual and organization will do. So we need to recognize and incentivize data provider, data user that will contribute to the data integration efforts. So awards, grants, and acknowledgements can encourage participations. So now I think we are now ready to launch the different questions that we had for that part, but that's really about participation. There are many ways you can engage with the implementation of the Green Deal data space, and we would like to know what are your preferences, how strongly you would like to be able to contribute, what you would need to know, and how you would like to learn, what you need to know to be able to go and to enhance your participation from a moment to the next. So yeah, please take some time to respond to the question. If you have any remarks, question, please ask them in the chat, and I will try to go through. I think now Mattia Santoro from CNR will talk about the technical blueprints and the outcomes that the work on this has bring. But yeah, I just would like to wait a bit for you to respond to those questions.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Sebastian. And indeed, thank you very much for the presentation and for the questions. I hope that everybody can see them. It's a few questions, so please take a moment to respond to them. And in the meantime, maybe before we move to Mattia, would you like to address any of the questions we have already received? And some of them are actually related to the questions we're asking. So I don't know if you would like to, if you have a moment now, to respond to them. For instance, one of the first questions was, how will the pilots be selected, which is actually, I think, complementary to what you just said. But if you could just maybe as a wrap up, also to repeat how pilots will be selected.
Okay, so for the pilots, we came up with a few ideas, but we welcome many more. So there are different stages of engagement. So if we go from lightweight to more demanding engagement, lightweight could be, so we have this list of binding targets. So we think addressing them will necessitate a work that will enable many more activities that are actually really well aligned with the data space objectives in general, as described by Johan. So those Green Deal policy binding targets, because they are very diverse, are really our reservoir of potential ideas. And then we need to select. So it could go from lightweight hackathon. So we would organize, well, the implementation call would organize hackathon on where different ideas would be explored. The successful one will open the floor to another stage that can be then used to build on top of what the hackathon and creative workshops would have identified. That's one. Second one, that's some of the implementation call have been doing that, is to have open call during the implementation. So it would say, okay, please, potential interested parties, form a consortium, build your case and submit your ideas so that we can, well, the Green Deal Data Space Implementation Group will be able to review them and to allocate some funding so that the idea can be pushed forward. That's a bit more demanding. And another one, of course, is to be part of the implementation consortium that will have to get organized. So those are the different ideas. One more that I could mention is that, as I said, there are already quite some data infrastructure initiatives, Horizon Europe funded project running. Some of those, of course, have work and project going on that are very relevant, and we need to find the right way to benefit from and to contribute to those projects. And I'm just, for that, I don't have any clear idea of how formal that link could be. Maybe that's for the European Commission to think about it, because there is obviously synergies to be built. But that's those are the ideas that we have been working with. If you have more ideas, more recommendation, please drop them in.
Thank you very much. We actually had received a question regarding collaboration with other Horizon Europe projects and calls. So we may get to that in a moment. But actually, and how we can collaborate with such projects. So thank you very much, Linda, for the question. But additionally, before we dive into other questions, I see that only 60 of you out of 100 that were here today responded to our questions in the poll that we launched, and you should still see it on your screen. Maybe we'll actually get into that, and if you, Sebastian, could clarify a little bit what are we actually asking there in this question, because I think the first one was actually related to what you just said. So what do you guys think of hackathons and creative workshops to select participants and create relationships among them? So basically that, as you said, that this is one of these more casual modes to identify interested stakeholders. And then as a follow-up question, we have, what would you think of an open call requiring consortium to be formed, select more demanding use cases? Would you like to comment and maybe explain a little bit more just with a few sentences on that, Sebastian? What are we asking there?
Yes. So, for example, the Green Deal, the data space for smart communities that has started implementation, they have launched as well open call to be able to identify use cases. So that's about terminology. They are calling them use cases, Here we are more after pilots. Okay, maybe down the road we will have to to align our different ways to engage and the object we are using to trigger progress. But I think for them, it was about, okay, having open call. I think the EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud, also has been working with those open call, where that's basically a call to the community. Please, community, get together. This is what we need from you. This is what we want to achieve. What is your proposal? It can be seen as a lightweight proposal. You need to form a consortium. You need to have a budget. As you might know, this will be a 50% funding initiatives, which means that when you are funded to participate, you will have to find 50. I mean, if you spend 100, the European Commission or a data space would fund 50% of that, and you would have to in kind inject the difference. So I hope this is clarifying the point of what are open calls and how more demanding they are, because that's more formal typically.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for clarifying, and indeed, thank you guys for commenting also in the chat and responding to the question that you can still see on your screen. We were just discussing the second question that you have in your poll, and indeed, a few of you suggested some other options, and of course, supported the idea and the approach suggested by Sebastian and by Great. Then the next question we have about how would you like the participants to be selected and what are the requirements towards them. So it is about the readiness to join GDDS, that will be actually connected to our technical blueprint, or their relevance to the Green Deal data space objectives. And thank you very much for responding to that question. And I see that you have other ideas for that too. And then we have the fourth question, which is related to what we just mentioned. So what are the methods, the options in which, the ways in which you would like to contribute and onboard to Green Deal data space? So just a last moment to click on that. And then maybe in the meantime, as you still have a few seconds to respond, maybe let's get back to some of the questions we receive. For instance, we have a nice question regarding timeline of the Green Deal data space. And just to quote the question we received, I see that the GDDS strategic roadmap starts in January 2025. Which great activities are foreseen in 2024? Would it be a second phase of this GDDS preparatory action?
So not to my knowledge. So there will be a gap in activities. So I think our project will formally end towards the end of April. And then, given the current timelines, the implementation of the Green Deal data space should start in January 2025. It might be a bit, I mean, a bit after, a bit before, but those are the ballpark figures. And so we need also to invent and to see how we can keep the contact, keep the connection with the community during those 6+ months where no funding will be dedicated for that. But, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, sorry, Sebastian, I can jump in also on this question. So yes, as Sebastian was saying, officially our project is going to end at the end of April. And yes, it's true that there will be a little gap between the deployment, so the continuation of the project, which according to the timeline that Johan mentioned, in the work program of Digital Europe, it's foreseen in Q1 and Q2 of 2025. So starting next year, January, February, more or less. It depends, of course, on the outcome of the proposals. And maybe just to continue the webinar, I will share some updates about, what we still foresee in this phase 2 of the GREAT project.
Sure, thank you very much, Nevena, for contributing to that. With that, I will end the poll, and thank you very much for all your comments and all your responses. I see that you more or less agree with the suggested idea, so thank you very much for that. And of course, we'll take under consideration all the elements you mentioned here and identified here. So thank you very much for that. And good point regarding the fourth question. Indeed, we should have all of the above as an option. But thanks for leaving the comment. And Nevena, would you like to comment now? No, that's for the second part of the webinar, right? Regarding the deployment and the next steps, right?
Yes, we plan to have a short update in the closing remarks. So I can see that there are some questions. Of course, everyone is very curious to see what is coming next and what Sebastian presented. But yeah, let's discuss it in the closing part.
Sure. So thank you very much. And I think indeed I'll then pass the floor back to Sebastian, and probably then you will pass it on to Mattia.
Yes, yeah, I think it is time to move on. So I will stop sharing my screen, Mattia. And the floor is yours. And during your presentation, I will go through. There are quite many questions in the chat, and I will go through and respond to them while Mattia is presenting us the technical blueprint. So the floor is yours, Mattia.
Thank you, Sebastian. I hope you can see my screen now, the presentation.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mattia Santoro from National Research Council of Italy, and as anticipated, this is the presentation of the work we have been doing in the great project regarding the technical blueprint. So what is the Green Deal data space? I think now you are quite familiar with the concept, and that the high-level overarching goal is to be able to interconnect the currently fragmented and dispersed data from the different ecosystems, so to offer this interoperable and trusted IT environment. So the technical blueprint, as it was stated at the beginning, is the reference architecture, which has the goal of explaining how these existing and possibly planned data ecosystems can be connected to provide these interoperable, secure data sharing environment. Okay. So at a very high level, our approach was that we are going to design a digital ecosystem. So we want to allow the different entities which are already existing to be able to share, to collaborate, to interoperate in order to build and provide this, let's say, a high-level service, which is in this case, the data sharing and data exploitation in a way which is as simple as possible. And the digital ecosystem paradigm also is very appropriate in cases like the one that we face in this moment where we have, a very high level of heterogeneity in terms of systems that can contribute to the Green Deal, and in terms of changes, both at the technological level. We have a lot of technology changes that are coming out in these years, and we expect more in the following years, and of course at the scientific and geopolitical level. So the concept of digital ecosystem, this paradigm allows us to design something which is flexible enough to cope with these changes. From an interoperability point of view, what does it mean to build on existing and future capacities? Here I try to capture in a very simple slide what it means. We have a set of data sources. Of course, this can be either very large data ecosystems or small data providers. But what they have in common from the interoperability point of view is that they share their resources using a set of interoperability interfaces, which include metadata, formats, discovery services and APIs, thesaurus, ontologies, data formats, and so on. So in a very heterogeneous domain like the Green Deal one, we have a high level of heterogeneity of these interoperability interfaces. And we have come up with a set of basic principles for the design of the Green Deal data space. And these high-level principles are inclusiveness. So as I was saying, we have a high level of heterogeneity, and in terms of metadata formats, data encodings, and so on. And we want to be able to be as inclusive as possible, so allow the participation from the different data systems which are out there. Fairness in the sense of level playing field, so ensure that there is no privileged access to specific actors or specific systems, and autonomy. As I was saying, in the Green Deal domain, such as also in the others, but especially in the Green Deal domain, we have a lot of existing systems out there that are already operating, that are very relevant for the Green Deal aspects, and they have their own operations, so they have their own governance, and they have so their own autonomy. We want to be able to interoperate with these systems while leaving them as autonomous as possible. So to this, to the design of the Green Deal data space digital ecosystem, the concept of soft infrastructure is a key concept. This can be defined as an invisible, made up of technology neutral agreements and standards on how to participate in an ecosystem. As you know, the challenge here is when we talk about agreements and standards, including technical interoperability standards, is that the Green Deal is covering a very wide range of scientific domains, and due to this, we have the issue of not being able to establish one single common standard to which all the different participants should comply. So how do we transform this collection of diverse systems that use different technological standards into a digital ecosystem? This is where we have the two pillars of the Green Deal data space. One is about the digital ecosystem governance, which will be covered by the next presentation, the colleagues who EGI who have worked exactly on this specific topic. And from the technical point of view, we have a set of what we call logical components. So these are the components that are in charge of implementing all the necessary interoperability arrangements in order to connect the different data sources with the different data consumers applications, and have this task of implementing the necessary interoperability arrangements. In particular, we have two main categories. We have identified two main categories of these logical components. What we call core components, they constitute the foundation of the digital ecosystem. And of course, we expect these to be quite stable, both in terms of number and basic functionalities. So very simple examples of these core components are, of course, a catalog, a status checker to be able to ensure that the different providers are online, and so on and so forth, registry of data sources, and so on, very basic components. And then we have another layer of what we have called facilitators components. These are designed in order to facilitate as much as possible the use of the different resources that are provided in the Green Deal data space. And these components are expected instead to evolve quite rapidly, both in terms of number and functionalities. This is where technological advancements can be incorporated in the digital ecosystem for the Green Deal data space. These include, for example, of course, data transformation tools, processing transformations, and so on and so forth. All of these components, of course, expose APIs, both standard and specific APIs for being exploited by external users, external consumers. As far as security, we want, which is security and trust, which is an important aspect of the data spaces in general, not only the Green Deal one. We want to allow each provider to be able to define its own policies, and these must be supported by the Green Deal data space. And of course, we want to decouple the authentication and authorization processes to be able to support also multiple identity providers. And the authorization framework that is part of our design is a very well-known framework. It is based on the XACML1, which is a widely known and widely adopted framework for ensuring security. So what we have designed aims to provide these main benefits for the different actors that are expected to interact with the data space. For the final users, we will provide the data space, we provide mediation and harmonization functionalities in order to facilitate the data access and exploitation from the different communities, the different scientific domains that will be part of the Green Deal data space. And these are meant to enable new scenarios for data exploitation. For intermediate users, that are those actors, those users that will build new services, added value services on top of the content of the GDDS, the design and the concept of digital ecosystems provide the flexibility to support the changes in the technological context and to allow the introduction of new components. Whereas for the data providers, so the ones that are supposed to provide the main content of the GDDS, we have a low entry barrier because, as I explained in my previous slides, we will have this set of logical components that allow data providers to participate and to join the data space with a minimal effort on their side, ideally supporting the different existing standards and data policies which they have. And so we have tried to design something which makes it as easy as possible for the data providers to participate in the data space and to provide data. So this is my presentation, and I don't know if we want already to have the questions, Veronica, or take some of the questions in the chat?
Sure, good question. I mean, actually, we could launch the questions, like our questions, the poll, so that everybody has a little bit of time to respond, and then we can also maybe, if we could comment upon them a little bit, so that everybody knows what they're responding to, and then we can jump into the questions we received from the audience.
Yeah. So, oh, please,
Yeah, go ahead.
Veronica, go ahead. No. I was going to comment that the questions are quite self-explanatory, I think. So in terms of the technical readiness, of course, the idea here is to be able to understand what the state of the possible participants to the Green Deal data space. And for the second question, we would like to understand what is that you see as the major benefit in participating to the Green Deal data space. We have come up with some possibilities, which are the most obvious in our opinion, but of course, any additional idea or any additional suggestion, even in the chat, is something that we'd very much welcome.
Thank you very much, Mattia. And indeed, and maybe just to add one comment to the second question, of course, there are probably other benefits you're thinking of, but just we wanted to give you some groups that we find relevant, and that's why we want to just know which ones of those are the most relevant for you. Otherwise, as well, we invite you to add comments in the chat if you think something else is even more relevant than the ones we identified here. So just to shout out to everybody on the call that the poll is currently on your screen. So I hope you can just click and respond. So while the audience is responding to that, we can get back to the chat and maybe respond to a few comments and questions that were submitted during your presentation. The first question we had, I think it's a little bit related to also as a follow-up after work package, after Sebastian's presentation, if it's an option to focus on the data needed for the various European directives. I think it's a little bit more from the global level, unless so I'm not sure if Mattia, you want to comment anything on that aspect.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat, Veronica, or can you repeat the question, because I was reading, so.
Sure. Oh, yes, of course. So if you see, because the first, let's say, comment we received, but I think it's also as a, let's say, follow-up after Sebastian's presentation was, is it an option to focus on the data needed for the various European directives? So that will be for work package, for your work package will be mostly related to data sources that we onboard and the data providers we get in touch with.
Of course, maybe the colleagues who will then discuss the high priority data sets pillar of our project can say more about this. But in general, yes, the idea should be that of focusing on the data which is more relevant for the Green Deal aspects, for the Green Deal policies. And so that is one of the main drivers. From the technical point of view, then so the technical interoperability then, as I said, comes after that. So once you have identified the primary, not the primary, the first data sources you want to connect, it is important to implement the necessary interoperability arrangements in order to allow these providers to connect in a way which is as seamless as possible.
It's actually a good point, because it's a nice transition to the next question we received, a comment and a question from Vidika. Thank you very much for that. So basically, indeed, it's a question about this as you said, the seamless connection, and the potential users of the data spaces who need to make use of different data sources, probably coming from different data spaces. So then the data exchanges and flows, they need to be frictionless and seamless. And so that's why making use of different data spaces has to be avoided. So it's easier if it's just one point where you can go and seamlessly use data from different sources. So it's a question if you as Green Deal data space, if we have taken that under consideration. So this connection between different data sources and data spaces.
Of course, indeed, that is a very good question and a very good point. The so-called inter-data space interoperability is something that is part both of our specific work and, of course, for the Data Space Support Center, which is the overarching project that, let's say, is coordinating, if you want, the different preparatory actions. So yes, and I expect also that different data sources, well, many data sources, many data providers would, join in different data spaces. For example, I'm thinking of something about related to energy or related to agriculture and so on. They are all relevant topics also for the Green Deal. And so that is why our idea is to be as flexible as possible in terms of allowing data providers to participate with their existing implementations and their existing systems, so that is easy for them to participate in different data spaces. And as far as users, the same applies. For example, one user could choose to enter through the Green Deal data space using his or her preferred technologies, and ideally that those technologies are supported by the data space that then implements all the interoperability requirements to allow the data retrieval and consumption for this user in a way which is as seamless as possible.
Thank you very much, and I hope that it responds to the question we received. We have two more questions. One which I think is related to what you just said, which are so what are the standards, the common standards that we are taking into consideration? I think that would be, of course, for us as the Green Deal data space, but I know that we were in touch with OGC and their standards. Of course, there's also ISO, so and the ones on the national level. So what are we considering in terms of the Green Deal data space?
Yeah, well, as I said, since we have a very heterogeneous landscape here, of course, there are a lot of different standards that are relevant. The idea is to be able to support as many as possible, and the blueprint, the technical blueprint, is designed with this in mind. Of course, then during the deployment phase, so the next project, the deployment and implementation will have to use a prior authorization to support first some standards, then some others, and there are set of possible approaches to decide these priorities. But this is not, let's say, a technical issue per se. It is more about the process that the next consortium will decide to follow to support the relevant standards.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers as well Mika's question. Just a kind reminder for everybody that on your screen you should be able to see the poll, which is still on. So there is still a moment to respond while we move on to the next question. So there is a pretty technical question. So Mattia, if CNR is developing or plans to develop an API or APIs, any algorithms to enable data exploitation?
Well, as I said, the idea is to allow to use as much as possible standard APIs or standard web interfaces. So as if that is available, that is the main, the preferred choice, then of course, as I said, the different logical components will very likely expose their APIs, and those APIs can be as complex as the implementers will choose, but of course, utilizing those APIs and specific APIs will request some effort for the participants. So, as I said, best option is to use existing standards and then also provide specific APIs.
Thank you very much. And then the last question we have in the chat is, what, if any, is the relationship of GREAT with the Green Deal data space, the German one, Advanio, and I think it's also other initiatives like that. So what is our connection with other Green Deal data spaces, the private ones as well? And please maybe respond to that from more technical blueprint perspective, because of course we could also discuss it on a higher level of interoperability of different data spaces.
Yeah, well, in terms of other relevant initiatives, also from the private tech sector, we have in our first version of the deliverable analyzed some of the existing solutions. For example, the solution of the International Data Space Association, which are providing these technical convergence documents. So we have analyzed our design and our interoperability with respect to that. And there are many initiatives that are relevant for this Green Deal data space. We have analyzed in our first deliverable some of them. Maybe in the second version this could be expanded a little bit, but the private sector, as I said, we have very much analyzed the International Data Space Association documents so far.
Thank you very much for responding. Thank you, Linda, for question. Then we will be slowly closing the poll that we launched. So last moment, these are just two questions of multiple choice, so we can just easily click. So if you still see it on your screen, and you should, please just give us your answers. Let us know what you think. It's a question about your technical readiness to be a part of the Green Deal data space. So if you're basically ready with only minor technical issues, or if you're not ready really with major technical issues, which is also okay. We just need to know that. And then the second question related to benefits that you foresee in the Green Deal data space. So I see that some of you are connecting and disconnecting technical issues. So welcome back to everybody who's connecting to us. I hope you can see the poll on your screens, and that you can vote on that. So I will leave the poll running for a few more seconds. And with that, I will thank you very much, Mattia, for the presentation and for the questions. And with that, I think we'll pass the floor to Marta now.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much. So I will proceed to share my screen, and let me put this in a full screen. So if you can confirm it's coming along. If you can confirm, you can all see this. Yes, okay.
Yes, and full screen. Thank you.
Oh, cool, thanks.
Thank you very much. So I will, on my side, finish the poll for Mattia's presentation. Thank you very much, everybody, for contributing. And then Marta, please.
I hear some Okay, so thank you. My name is Marta Gutierrez. I will introduce the work. I will present our findings in the work of business models and governance that myself and my colleague Mark Dietrich from EGI Foundation have conducted together with all the colleagues from the W before team. excuse me. So I will start with the challenges. What are the features and the dimensions that have characterized the Green Deal data space in terms of governance? Where are we up for? So I will start with the scale. We have to consider all kinds of ranges, starting from citizens that may be able to contribute some data to the Green Deal data space, all the way up for existing data initiatives that have been on the making for decades, or even new initiatives like digital twin initiatives in there, or communities that are long-standing communities, again, like the GEO, like Inspire, or services from the Commission that, again, have been that they have very critical and very essential data for the Green Deal data space. If we switch to a scope, we find all the classic geographical scopes ranging from local, regional, national, EU, and global. But this is not the only way that things relate to each other in terms of geographical scopes. There may be thematic scopes that go cross-boundary across all these kind of geographical scopes. So business models, we are looking at a range, again, going all the way from public good or ad reasons to commercial data businesses. In terms of the objectives, what we have done here, it's itemize the data value chain in a set of objectives, starting from the community all the way up to policy fulfillment. And we acknowledge the fact that any one of the use cases or piloting activities may come and contribute to the objectives of the Green Deal at any one of these levels, not necessarily having to go all the way up to policy fulfillment. Sectors, we acknowledge the complexity of the Green Deal data space. Every single sector of the economy that's more or less translate to a particular data space. It's affected. Yeah, it has some duties towards the Green Deal objectives. And if we are looking at the challenges to reach the climate neutrality, in 2030, 2050, all of these sectors will have responsibilities towards it. So we are looking at a quite systemic change in the economy and in the way that the digital transformation needs to go in here. So legislation, this is a picture that is painted by all the data spaces as well. We are looking at the intersection between national legislatory actions together with all the horizontal data legislation, like, for example, Johan has introduced, we already have in place BGA and DA as of the 11th of January, with the AI Act as well, has done a lot of progress, and together with sectorial legislation, which for the Green Deal, we are talking at the European level of something of 144 initiatives at the sector level, together with global treaties, such as that of the Paris Agreement. So, and finally, and last and not least, is what are the ethical and cultural remarks with regards to data sharing? So whereby here in Europe, outside Europe, we may be seen as a sharing as a regulatory driven kind of sharing, but it may be different in different kinds of cultures, and they may be doing sharing for rewards, or sharing that there's not much regulation in those places, or sharing in order to gain some competitive advantages only, together with intersections of national and political interests. So you may have seen all of this many, many times. We adopted the definition of the Data Spaces Support Center as a way, it's a distributed system, and in which the governance framework is a major pillar in order to ensure data transactions. The data transactions happen in respecting data sovereignty. So, and for sure, for the Green Deal data space, it is true that there is a number of data infrastructures that will be able to participate in order to enable one or more, for sure, more than one use cases. So, so very much in connection and in parallel with this definition, we just see the Green Deal data space as all this activity. The mission is to establish the foundation of an operational Green Deal data space. So therefore, we have to deliver a robust technical infrastructure together with the governance frameworks in order to empower participants of the community of practice to collaboratively address all these challenges, all these Green Deal challenges through a dynamic exchange of the supply and data demand. And we have to be able to measure socioeconomic benefits. So putting it in simple words, because governance is a complex topic, this is a simple definition of governance. It's just simply the process of making decisions about an entity. So what we have done in terms of analyzing the requirements is choosing all those questions that they need to be decided upon. And we have done all of these through the data space life cycle, including the formation, operations, monitoring activities, as well as sustainability. How will the data space continue its evolution in a sustainable manner? Many of those requirements will differ on which type of data are we talking about. So there is a categorization of data in terms of whether data is research or public data, whether we're talking about sensitive data, or whether we're talking about industrial or private data. And it will determine the type of features and attributes that will define the governance frameworks itself, including as well like which legislations or directives apply depending on which type of data. Going back to the governance, we need to define what exactly we need to put governance on. So these are the entities that we've identified within the governance framework, starting from the data itself. What are the responsibilities of data providers in terms of defining their data sources to be able to onboard them and make them available in the data space. Within the data space, we have to identify what are the functional components and all those logical components that Mattia has been describing before in the presentation before, in order to offer all this sovereign data sharing. Of course, the data space will be hosted in a digital platform. So in here, we have gathered all the requirements that come from IT governance, deployment and distribution, what shape will the data space will take into form, and so on. For sure, an important element of the data space is the adoption of the community. And here's why we are here with all of you. I've seen very interesting comments about the management of the community itself. How are we going to take on board by comment requirements? How are we going to make sure that the data space evolves in the future together with the community, taking into account all the requirements that come from all of you. The data space for sure needs to be able to enable the use cases or piloting activities as we've explained in the roadmap, and it needs to interact with data that is not just within the data space, but it will have to interact with data that is part of the ecosystem, being this data that it may well reside outside the data space. So we are talking for data sources, for example, that they may be in Asia or in America, but they are critical in order to fulfill the Green Deal objectives, even if those Green Deal objectives are part of Europe. So very quickly, I will just comment on what we've done, some of the work that we are doing in terms of the business models. And before you can put a business proposition in order to get the stakeholders in to buy in, we need to tell them what is the value proposition of the Green Deal data space. And the value proposition is very different depending on who is the stakeholder and the role they have within the data space itself. So I have put here a few examples of some of the feedback from our interactions with our stakeholders, and it ranges all the way from policymakers that they need to have the indicators for the Green Deal, the targets, to industry, where they just want data to be able to be competitive in the data economy in there. So yeah, I will not go into detail, of all of those. Again, this is one question that we've got repetitively every time we go and present our findings. Is like, what do I need to join? And this is not an exhaustive list, but we have done a set of of requirements coming. It was more or less like an intersection between all the directives that we have done and we have studied. So first of all, in order to be able to become a data provider, this may be eligible for natural persons, legal entities, or projects that apply to the rules of the governance framework, and with data holdings that are relevant for the Green Deal strategic objectives. They must have the legal right to share the data, and they should have the compliance with applicable acts and directives according to the data holdings that they have. And for sure, as Mattia has been explaining, everybody has to, in order to describe a data source, you should provide the metadata descriptions and machine-to-machine access APIs, documentations, and for sure, access and usage terms and conditions. Again, there should be some specification of quality procedures. There should be specifications, again, of security measures that are in place in particular sites, especially like we are talking about critical infrastructures. There may be cybersecurity requirements that apply to sites themselves, as well as the specifications of service levels of offerings, and to the adherence to the standard and formats agreed by the participating members. And while I've seen comments as well of what is the approach here, we will for sure adopt community standards. We are not about creating even more standards. We will adopt community standards, but for sure it will be not an all here with any kind of formats. It will have to for sure to be some kind of boundaries. The list is a little bit simpler for data users. They will need to identify themselves with the right level of assurance so data providers can trust them. And they will have to agree to the terms and conditions of the data providers. They should make sure that the data usage is done in a responsible and ethical manner. And that we may ask them for provision of the purpose for which the data is being used. So just to finalize, just some considerations. First things first, and the governance framework is very, very driven. We have to comply with all the legal requirements that come from the regulatory framework. So in here, we are just looking at the complex landscape of the directives, of the applicable directives, such as the Open Data Directive. They are, just to put a few examples. Horizontal on the Spire and its coming review, and as well as all the horizontal data directives. So we are for sure, we are trying to provide a lower entry barrier requirements into the data space. But what does that mean precisely? It may mean that, if, for example, if a data provider wants to join the Green Deal data space and they have to do some work in terms of integration or adherence to standards, we need to understand who is covering the cost in here. If the Green Deal data space covers the cost of that integration, it may mean higher cost to the Green Deal data space that we may have to translate into some kind of revenue models, and therefore we will need to account for that in the way we do our business models. In terms of inclusivity, we would like to have an all-inclusive governance, taking into account taking into account all the stakeholders, and with the understanding that this will have some implication in how the decision-making process goes. We've heard from some of our data initiatives that the success for the data sharing activities has always been based on taking a scientific-based approach, and we have seen governance structures in place that are matching particular thematics that are for which they bring the corresponding scientific expertise. So we have to consider whether that's applicable as well to the Green Deal data space, if we can bring thematic expertise in terms of the different clusters or the different Green Deal strategic areas. They may be able to then maybe have a bit of an assessment in terms of the quality of the data sources that are brought into the Green Deal data space. And just to finalize quickly with the last two, we are looking at the authorities, the governing authorities. How do we rule all of this? We may have to propose a pathway. At the moment, we don't have a final answer as to what is the shape of the governing authority that needs to be put in place, but it may have to range from some shape of a collaborative agreements to a legal form establishment in which different considerations are being taken, such as the establishment of ethics, or whether we will have to do by obligation establish intermediaries from the Data Governance Act, or whether a not-for-profit association will be more suitable for all of us. And just to finalize, the establishment of the trust framework is a setting, is a mixture of governance and technical rules in which we have to establish the way in which trusted participants can contribute, both providers and consumers. But it's not just down to participants and individuals. It may also be a set of trusted claims that may come from the Green Deal data space, such as those that are done based on the data and the data holdings or in particular use cases in order to do like claims for a net zero in there. So yeah, that's my final slide. I would like to launch the questions now. And for that, I'm going to ask you like 3 questions, no more. Hope they're not too complicated. I would like to, I'm coming back to, I'm still sharing, right?
Yes, it's not full screen anymore, but we can, I know that you're getting back to the slide just to, so that it helps audience to follow. You can, I suppose you can already see questions on your screen, and there should be 3 of them.
Okay, so in terms of questions, yeah, 3 questions. I would like to get your opinion on what do you think about stakeholders contributing in full to the governance framework. Yeah, that's question number 1. There's question number 2 is I would like to get your opinion on some of these requirements for data providers and data users. So therefore, I leave what I call the preliminary requirements for data providers and data users. It would be nice if you let us know, yeah, what do you think? Whether you can reply as a data provider, as a data user, or as both. And with that, I am kind of done. I think I'm very thankful that you are all here. I think your feedback is the most important, some of the most important input that we've had in order to be able to build this rightly with all of you. So I don't know if there are any questions in the chat.
Yes, there is one. Actually, already Mark started responding to some of them in the chat, but I think it would be nice to also comment for the whole audience. So the question goes, for the foundation, are you looking at a paid membership model, or are you not that far in deciding the business model yet?
I see the question. We are not that far for sure. As I mentioned, it depends on what are the obligations in terms of like I put an example of the considerations that we have to bear in mind with regards of revenue models, right? With one of them is this like who takes the cost of integrating particular data providers. So with that, I cannot give you a definite answer. It has been discussed for sure, not in the sense of a paid membership, but maybe into offering particular services that people may be interested in, such as storage, particular storage or particular computing. But it has not been put as a business model yet. It has been discussed as potential business models. Does that agree with what Mark is saying?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That of course it is a possibility, but then indeed, as we also explained before, and what Nevena will also clarify at the end, is that of course this is our vision, but then the implementation phase will be testing, and then we'll have the final answers then to the model, but then can be also depending on the user and the type of user that is going to be a part of the data space.
Right.
You just a kind reminder in the meantime that you should all have the questions on your screen, and then Marta is also sharing the screen with with these requirements for data users and data providers. So that's like help materials for all of you to respond to the questions that we launched, just 3 of them, multiple choice. So it should be pretty straightforward. And I see that for the moment, we don't have many more questions regarding specifically governance, but I see that we're discussing a little bit our relationship with other data spaces. And that was a question we had repeated in almost in 2 previous presentations. So maybe also from the governance perspective and interoperability on that level. Could you comment on that, Marta? How did GREAT do it in terms of our connection and then and relation with other data spaces, also private as well as the common European ones?
Yes, for sure. We've been working very closely with all the preparatory actions for other data spaces in conjunction with the data space support center. Ultimately, I know this is the challenge and vision from the Commission is to create this common European data space, right? That's the ultimate vision of it all. So at some point we should consider how do we talk to each other between data spaces, being interoperability at the data access, and we all understand that there are common use cases. There are use cases that will require data from different data spaces. So, and this should be made transparent from the governance point of view. So for now, we are trying to understand like what are the governance mechanisms that are being put in place. We are all for sure, we may have that different headings, but in terms of the content of the governance, we are all kind of covering, let's say, the building blocks. We are all covering like what kind of data governance does it need to be in place? What kind of organizational governance does it need to be in place in order to be able to talk to each other? I know we don't have precise answers right now, and it should be like this. But for sure, because we have to take into account the complexity of the landscape. And so there is no one size fits all kind of solution. We are all doing our corresponding homeworks into governance frameworks, into different governance models that depend on what kind of data you have in place. So there is a lot of work being done. I have been this morning in the mobility deployment workshop in a governance, and we've had a very nice conversations on the ways for working together and collaborating together on this work. So bear in mind, bear with us that we're working very hard on this with all the other data spaces.
Thank you very much, Martin. Actually, we reached the time. Maybe, but okay, but that's a question more to technical blueprints. So maybe Mattia will respond in the chat. And in the meantime, we need to start moving to the next presentation. But of course, Sebastian, I see you're raising your hand, but please just join our discussion.
Yeah, just the result of the poll that I found really interesting, and I just wanted to make a little comment on it, and maybe to try to initiate some more detail in the chat towards the end, to keep some question or discussion towards the end of our session. So, for example, question 2, would you be willing to participate as a data provider with a given requirement? And so we have a no with 38%, matching with a bit of help at 38%. And I found it interesting to see that with the next one. Would you be willing to participate as a data user? And here the yes is, so it's like a large majority don't want to share, but want to use. And so I found it really interesting. And that's exactly the conundrum we are trying to solve, is that sharing is an investment. And by reusing, it's clear that you will make and you will create some value. And so I think on that question 2, we need clearly to identify the reason why data provider would not participate, to try to see there what are the barrier, because that's exactly the barrier that we are trying to overcome with the data spaces. So please, if you have responded no to the question 2, having some more information about the why in the chat would be really valuable, because those are the blocker we need to understand and overcome. So yeah, thank you, and please share, and don't worry, it's we are not going to use that in in any other ways than trying to help and to mitigate those blockers. Yes.
Super good point. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Indeed, this is something we can discuss in our final part of the session today. So discussion and the final feedback. So thank you very much for pointing that out, and thank you very much for responding last second to respond to that. And I will get closing the poll as we invite to stage Hara for our next presentation dedicated to data sets. So thank you very much, Marta. Thank you very much, Sebastian. And then I am passing it on to Hara.
Yes, good afternoon. Let me try to share the screen. And please let me know if you're seeing what you're supposed to be seeing.
Yes.
I suppose that's the one, full screen.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Great, thank you very much. So good afternoon from me as well. I am Haris Hadjikyriakou. I work at EODC, at the Earth Observation Data Center in Vienna, Austria. And EODC has been leading the work package on the high priority data sets. Today, similarly to my colleagues earlier, I would like to present you the work that we, together with our work package 5 partners, have been doing. Of course, it's going to be a high level due to time limitations. And I would like, before I forget it, I would like to start with a disclaimer that I've noticed recently that it kind of helps. So here you see that the topic is the high priority data sets. And what I would like to clarify from the beginning of the presentation is that this does not equal high value data sets. So the directive from the European Commission that I guess many of you are familiar with. High priority data sets is a term that was created in the GREAT project, and it describes the data sets that are of the highest priority for the use cases and initiatives that we had in the project. So with that having, after having this clarified, anyway, let's start with the objective of the work package. And the objective was to create an expandable set of data sets and services, I will add, that are required to support key use cases. What we mean by key use cases, we mean the ones that are required for the achievement of the European Green Deal objectives. In the GREAT project, we have been focusing on the 3 strategic actions, the ones that you see on the bottom right corner. So 2030 Biodiversity Strategy, the Zero Pollution Action Act, and the Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. Therefore, the creation, the investigation, the whole work around the high priority data sets has been focused more or less around these strategic actions. A few words on the approach. I've seen some familiar names and faces in this meeting, so I think many of you are already familiar with it. But for the ones that joined first time, just to repeat that we basically have been collecting knowledge from 2 main, if you want to call it, sources. The first one is the GREAT reference use cases and initiatives, which we call rookies for short. So I will continue with this term. We have been engaging with specific data users and providers. And by specific, I mean that work on a specific project or to achieve a specific aim thematically, I mean. And we have been trying to extract the data requirements, the product they bring out to the public, and try to understand their data gaps and their issues. Through deep dives, we have collected all this information, and we have been feeding the so-called datasets inventory, high priority datasets inventory, which is a list of specific datasets that are required by the rookies. The second source is the great consortium engaged stakeholders. So through the runtime of the project, we have been engaging with a lot of stakeholders through the Great Partners Network or not, like beyond. And we have been trying to identify key services, catalogs, portals where data are offered to the public. This has been feeding into the data services inventory, high priority data services inventory, which I'm gonna come to in a bit. Starting with the data sets inventory, I would like to dedicate a couple of minutes to talk to you about the reference use case and initiatives that we had. And I'm starting with phase one. So in phase one, we had five rookies. And starting with the two first ones, we also had created task forces around them. So the first one is the water task force. And in there, we have two hydrology use cases from the Utrecht University, which has been a partner in the project as well. These are the global hydrology modeling and the seasonal forecasting of water resources. Then the second one is the marine task force with IMODNet. Excuse me. Yes, with IMODNet, which is a long-term marine data initiative for in situ marine environmental and human activity data funded by the European Commission. GOES4M is the global observation system for mercury, represented by our partner CNR in the project, which is a geo-flagship aimed to support the Minamata Convention on Mercury Secretariat. EPOS, represented by EPOS Eric in GREAT, is the European Plate Observing System. And this is a distributed research infrastructure for the solid earth science communities in Europe. BioGIS 360 is a tool developed by IPSAT, a private company from Italy, for biodiversity monitoring, and it provides information on the possible environmental impacts during new green power plants planning. That was about phase one. In phase two, we changed the structure a little bit, and the ones of you that have participated in the stakeholder fora, then you know that we were focusing on one strategic action every time, and we were working with specific use cases and initiatives within this strategic action. So I'm starting with the biodiversity here. We had three use cases, starting with AI for Trees from the Austrian Institute of Technology, which tries to understand and explains how climate change affects tree growth at the single tree species level. Then we had the Natural Capital from RIMV, which is the National Institute for Public Health and Environment in the Netherlands, which supplies information on the value of our natural capital and ecosystem services. And finally, we had the biodiversity in Wadensee use case from Deltares, which analyzes the impact of sea level rise on morphology and thus in the distribution of ecotypes in the Wadensee across the three countries that Wadensee touches, let's say, the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark. Then we moved on with the climate change adaptation strategy, and here we had three more rookies. The first one was from the Major Development Agency of Thessaloniki, the Shared Public Administration for Climate Change at Thessaloniki Metropolitan Area. Then we had the project Harmonia and the specific pilot in Milan, which develops and will provide rather a support system for improved resilience in sustainable urban areas to cope with climate change and extreme events. And finally, we worked with usage, which stands for Urban Data Spaces for Green Deal, and with the specific pilot of urban heat island estimation in Ferrara, in the city of Ferrara in Italy, which tries to make city level data available in a fair way. Finally, from the Zero Pollution Strategic Action, we had two more rookies. The first one is Unlock, which was represented in the project by Wageningen University and SURF. And they create an open infrastructure for exploring new horizons for research on microbial communities. And finally, we had SDGs EYES, which stands for Sustainable Development Goals, Enhanced Monitoring through the Family of Copernicus Services. With the specific pilot of greenhouse gases emissions from forest fires from CMCC from Italy, which tries to increase the accuracy in the assessment of greenhouse gases emissions through forest fires. A bit on the structure of the data set inventory. Right now, we have close to 100 specific data sets that have been collected through the analysis of the RUSIs that I just mentioned. They have been described with mandatory or optional tags, the ones that you see on the right side. They have been categorized based on the high-value dataset categories, but also the essential variable categories. There are different types, from satellite imagery, gritty data, topographic maps, and so on. And they have been assessed for their fairness using the tool called Fuji, created under the Fair is Fair, the European Fair is Fair project. Moving on to the data services inventory, I have created this very busy slide just to show the very busy landscape of Green Deal related data services in Europe and beyond. This is, of course, a non-exhaustive list of services, but I've put the ones that maybe we are all a bit more familiar with. We have been collecting them in an inventory with some information, some basic information like the service names, the URL to the APIs, how you can access them, in what kind of, in which high-value dataset category they belong, and so on. This list continues to grow. Every time we engage with new people or every time we are in a new event, this list continues to grow, and you will see its final form in our final deliverable. I think I'm a bit over time, so I will rush the last slides a bit. The data services have been, they are being prioritized. So in phase 1, we prioritize them once, and after the end of phase 2, we will prioritize them again. Why we do that? In order to identify the ones of the highest priority for the future implementation of the Green Deal data space. And in these colored polygons, you can see the criteria. Quickly to go through them, it has been the relevance to the reference use case and initiatives. It has been one of the most important criteria for us. The specific strategic actions that we have been focusing on, how relevant they are to existing European Green Deal initiatives and programs, and you can see some examples in the bullet points, how complete their data offering is in terms of spatial and temporal coverage, how fair they are, and they are being assessed with tools that are already existing and created by European projects, and how frequently they are being used. Last but not least, we have been working on extracting the data gaps from, in general, our engagements, not only with the rookies, but also in the stakeholder forum and whatever, whenever we talk to new people from the domain. And by data gaps, because a question will come up, just to explain it, we do not mean only the data that do not exist, that we cannot find publicly, but also the ones that are hard to combine with other data types, the ones that we know they exist, but we cannot access because of licensing issues or other issues. Even the ones that we cannot openly use because of ethical implications. Here you can see some examples, but I'm late, so I'm going to the thank you slide. And with that, I have finished my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hara. And yes, if that's okay, now I will also launch the questions that we prepared for the audience before we go to the questions they asked you. So let me launch that. You should be able to see it maybe from the technical perspective. I will just explain that this time you are in the first question, which asks, do you agree with the presented approach of creating the great Green Deal data space inventory of datasets and services? So basically here you choose if you strongly agree, which is 5, or strongly disagree, which is 1, and then the numbers in between are corresponding to, let's say, the change of your opinion on that. So please have a look at that. And then the second question is an open one. So in which aspects of the presented approach do you see room for improvement? So this is an open question to you if there is any specific aspect that you could think of. And then we're moving to 2 questions which are really on your personal opinion level. Which data sets are of highest priority to according to you for the Green Deal data space? And what are the gaps, as Hara mentioned before, that you encounter, that you think that these might be the data that are not accessible or even non-existing? So anything that comes to your mind regarding the gaps. And then as the audience responds to that,
Veronica,
yes?
sorry to interrupt. We have missed an update between us because we have sent some specific answers for the most popular datasets and gaps. And I just want to copy them in the chat in case it is easier for people to choose and reply.
Okay, sure.
Fine.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, it's not gonna look good. Let's see. Did I send it? It's not too bad. Yeah. So these are the options for the datasets, question 3. If you have something else in mind, feel free to write it because it's an open question technically right now. But also some options for the gaps, for inspiration, let's say. Okay, thank you, Veronica. Sorry.
Sure, of course. And then the question we had, let me get back to that. Okay, so where can we access the data sets of the use cases?
Where the use cases have them. In the project, we have been creating an inventory. We have not been storing the datasets. We have not been collecting the actual datasets somewhere centrally or something like that. It is rather an inventory with some metadata, some tags, as we call them, for their better description. But the datasets themselves are where the specific use cases store them or have them available.
And to have access to that list, can we say that some of the information is in the deliverable?
Yes.
And then you will update your deliverable soon, where the final inventory will be made public, right?
Yes, in the second version of the deliverable, you will find the full list of the datasets and the services with links rather. So in case the datasets are publicly available and described with a link, then the link will be there for you and you will be able to access them. In some cases, datasets are not, cannot be reached by a link. We can all imagine that it can be, sometimes we have discussed that they are in some hard drive on a desk of someone, or it can be just closed, so on.
Okay, thank you very much, of course, for clarifying that. And then maybe as you guys are responding to the question, I'll actually share some of the results, so that also gives you an idea of the responses and what our audience says about that. So the first question we had about agreeing with the approach. So yes, most of you, but we have just a few responses. Is 5 no 1, so that's already good, but feel free to click and respond to that. In the second question regarding room for improvement, we have a little bit of diversity, because of course we have, yes, the thing that we discussed mostly in the chat, so open use and some licenses if needed for data sets, rational data set, talk to more data providers. Yes, that's an important part to include you. That's why we're having the discussion, of course, with data providers to inspire data sets. And I think this is also something that will connect us nicely to the question we received in the chat, which is, what about any kind of not only big pan-European initiative, but also local data, which are needed from diversity of countries and regions? Do you also foresee inclusion of local regional data?
Absolutely, and this has been within the scope of the project from the beginning. We have some use cases that look at local. I'm just thinking now. We could take as an example the use case from Thessaloniki, which are looking at the metropolitan area of Thessaloniki, and therefore they deal with data. They collect data for a very local area, which is the metropolitan area of Thessaloniki. Then a regional level is also within scope. For example, that could be the Alps or so. So maybe a sum of countries or regions that share a common characteristic. In that case, they belong to the Alpine region and so on. And services that provide data online have been included in the inventory. In the final deliverable, you will find from smaller to bigger when it comes to data coverage, let's say, services.
Thank you very much. And also to complement, we also, as we talked to, for instance, Harmonia use case, which you also mentioned, it also includes 4 European cities focusing on data specific, some of them not even whole cities, but districts of cities. So really going down into local sources. So for sure, it's a relevant part. And then moving to third question, which types of data sets are of the highest priority for the Green Deal data space? But of course, according to you, and we see Internet of Things, agriculture, raw materials, that's relevant for sure. And I'll also scroll, let you see biodiversity, according to our, as well here with the pollution, data, energy, transportation, as also according to our strategic actions that we focus on in GREAT. And the fourth question, the gaps, right? So which data are not as easily accessible, or the ones that you cannot find and use in your daily work? Health, personal reference, of course, that's a tricky one. So that's more complicated. Data harmonization, that's like a process of that, but of course that's a task of the data space. Interoperability, commercial data harmonization again. In situ as well, which also, oh yes, real time as well, and then in situ as well, which will also be a part of the Green Deal data space. Yes, I don't know if you have any other comment, Hara, because we need to move to our closing remarks because we have just 17 minutes. But if you have anything else to share with the audience or ask, that's
No,
the
please go
moment.
ahead. And I will go to the chat now to try to answer what is not answered. Thank you very much.
So please do. Thank you. Thank you very much, Hara. And with that, I think I will pass the floor to you, Sebastian and Nevena, to have some summary and a final feedback and some final questions from your side, as well as Nevena mentioned before, a little bit introduction to what will be happening next after GREAT.
Yeah, so maybe I could start.
Sure, of course.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed actually following and talking during this this final stakeholder forum. And yeah, to close, I just wanted to to follow up on the question of why the data provider would be reluctant actually to share their data, which I think is really the core, the core of the matter, because everything starts with sharing. But of course, sharing is an investment. So at the moment you make that investment, the value coming from this will not appear just straight away. So in the chat, if I summarize, of course, commercial data, having a license, having, for example, a data space, counting, measuring the popularity of the data set, and having a financial payment based on the popularity of a commercial data set would be one option. I also think that when unsure, hackathon or creative workshop or gamification, as was mentioned, is a nice way to engage with the community and also a way to enhance understanding of both sides, meaning understanding from the data space itself and understanding from potential data provider. And that's where there could be some scenarios being made on how and what would be needed to have another data provider entering the space. So, and I think there will be some maybe different level of maturity in terms of data sharing. Those that, at first sight don't want to share, and for that, hackathon, creative workshop might be a way to discover what is the potential value. And also, the reuse. I found it really interesting, that question on locality versus pan-European. Yes, every locality, every region, every cities will have their activities, but we don't want each and every city to reinvent the wheel every time they want to do something. So even though the data is local, the methodology, the tooling, the architecture can also be shared at a pan-European level within a data space, so that a city in Italy can redo what a city in Greece has been doing, because it's likely that they will share the same kind of constraint in a changing climate. So so that's one thing. And maybe the last point I wanted to highlight from today has been around interoperability. I think interoperability within a domain is already well exercised, but interoperability of data and services across many domains and across many standards, an end-to-end mapping of interoperability is still to be happening. So it's not because you already are interoperable up to a point that you are going to be interoperable with all the other that are interoperable within their domain. And so we need to be a bit careful. There is no warranty that all the standards can be interoperable with each other. And actually, I can assure you that they are not. So having a standard, following standards is part of the work, but it's not all of it. So now I will have to go and digest all that has been said today. And if any one of you want to add on this, please feel free. And Nivina, maybe you can take over.
Do we want to open up the floor? Maybe someone wants to to even say something. I don't know, but those that
We
are
had
more.
several, yes, dear, we had several active attendees today. So if anybody wants to join, please raise your hand or just let us know somehow if you would like to share a few words. Stefano, would you like
Yes,
to?
okay, I will share something that I think interesting to know. Okay, I'm from UK, but I'm supporting in developing a data space in Italy at regional, let's say, regional ecosystem. And the idea is to introduce the data space into the concept of agri-food at regional level. So we have several regions from, let's say, less developed region, which we can call NAT2. And the idea is how the data space can contribute on the development of the ecosystem regions. So one of the tasks that we have to face is to identify, first of all the innovation related in the regions. Therefore, try to identify through the universities, through research organizations, the data. And therefore also the digital innovation hubs in the area, because they are linked, they are bringing innovation, but they are not linked to each other. And this is quite an issue. And the third concept is how you can implement this quadruple helix approach. This means the smart strategy specialization. This means how they can cooperate between private, government, and let's say civil society, yes, and a research organization. Now, we are developing some kind of pilot projects. So this means experimentation. The idea is data. Space data is the only elements that can link and can bring some solution. Now, the question that I'm asking to you, yes, it's good that you are developing this space data, but there are so many, let's say, innovation around in any space, we can say, that this interoperability that we are discussing now is a critical point. How do you think, let's say, at the regional level, you can, let's say, develop a proposition or an approach where space data is at the center of the, let's say, of this concept? Anyhow, this is a project preparation we are dealing now. We are not still on the implementation. That's why we've been interested to link with your, let's say, great project. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is $1 million question that you're asking, and yeah, we need to accept and to embrace that this ambition of data spaces, and specifically the Green Deal data space, this ambition is a very, very hard to reach objectives. Okay, so it is going to be difficult. So I think that's why at the roadmap level, we said that we want to move step by step, and we want to make sure that we are building something that others can reuse, can contribute to, and that they will feel that they are listened to. So I think we are going to have to be very pragmatic, developing those data space, to be very smart, but also we will have to be, developing the data space, there will be a bit of luck in the sense that the use cases, the partnership that will be built, will have to be the right one. So that's my view on it. That's excessively ambitious. And so the pilots, and we'll have to map the diversity of cases that we are trying to cover in terms of public, private, small, big, SMEs, and so on. It needs to pave the way. There will be different geometry. If you remember that pictures that I showed with the different rivers flowing towards the mainstream, we need that. And it will it will require a lot of talents to be able to bring all these together. And so also I think that's why having those Green Deal binding targets as really the core of the engine, also being used for decision making sometimes, because we won't be able to address everything, will be also important. To reach a stage, foundation, at which point we will be able to scale up. But build the core, yeah, be lucky, be smart, but build the core, have the foundation, and then scale it up to different. So talk to regions that are already very advanced in that thinking. Talk to organization, people that are already very, very well advanced in data sharing, in reusing, in crossing silos. So that, yeah, that is what we need.
But you don't think that, I mean, having this type of multi-sources of data, this is also complicated. So what we are thinking, I mean, what I'm thinking at least is, why don't you use a single data source, for example, Earth observation, satellite, that mostly are free, and demonstrate the value of sharing with other data in order to avoid this whole obstacle that you just mentioned on provide the data, using the data. I mean, satellite data, or we call it space data, this is the exact definition, they are free. Everybody can use it, and everybody can, let's say, start at least understanding the value of data.
Yeah, I think Marta wants to say something. I will just comment that, yeah, space data, that's not enough in the sense that there are already many activities around space data. So I think they have their own cycle, their own pace, their own usage. This is really about crossing and breaking silos. And in space data, there are many data that are actually commercial. There are many private actors now operating in space. And I could cite Spire and many other. So yeah, I don't think that that's enough to cover the ambition of that data space, but start small in parallel and then converge. That's the, break the complex problem into small one and hope it will be well managed and well run so that it can converge. That's the only approach I know to tackle a complex problem. And I will now stop and leave the floor to Marta and then Nivina. Sorry.
I will do it quickly, right? Because we need to close, right, Nivina?
Yes, and we still have some points to share. So yes, super quickly.
Yeah, so super quick, just to address some of the points made from Stefano. While we in the Green Deal data space, we have looked at all the different challenges coming from the different types of geographical scopes from the different initiatives, including regional or local or national. Some other data spaces, they have a very strong focus on regional only. And I'm talking here about urban data spaces or smart cities or mobility. They are really going to particular cities, particular regions and say what's going on here. And they are bringing all these models. It is quite a common model, the quadruple helix, the stakeholder, where they are looking at, they're considering all the different types of stakeholders. So that's quite a common approach in those types of data spaces. The challenge here is to go beyond what are the current practices, where municipalities, they may be used to share the data only for their own purposes, and they've put examples of on reporting obligations. They want to explore what can go, how a data space can go beyond the reporting obligations or the sharing of the data in new scenarios. And we are talking here about public and private relationships. So they can benefit, they can go beyond, they can use like a private industry data in order to have better services in a city or have better services for agriculture, right? And just to finalize, I totally agree with Sebastian. Earth observation data, we could capitalize on the best practices and approaches that have been learned from the Earth Earth observation. There's a lot to learn from there, and they're very good successful data sharing practices, but it's not, we need more than that. Yeah, we need the statistical data, cohort data, we need all kinds of data that go beyond Earth observation to sort out the challenges.
Okay, I hope, Stefano, you got an answer to
Thank you.
your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And I really encourage everyone still share some questions in the chat. We will also try maybe to reach out to you directly. But as also Veronica already mentioned, we are running a little bit out of time. So, and I don't want to lose the audience. So just using these last moments of the webinar to share some updates or what is still there from our project. So in case you would really like to meet us or continue the engagement with the current preparatory action of the Green Deal data space, this is the official closing of the stakeholder forum. So, you know, the direct engagement with the community of practice, but still we have some events coming up in the pipeline before we close. So we are organizing a webinar on the 6th of March, called The Bridges Between Digital Twins and the Green Deal Data Space. This will be an online event, a webinar that you can join. There is already the registration page published on our website. In case you would like to follow, we will have speakers from the Commission, also from the ILIAD project, even from MWODnet and ECMWF, Destination Earth, etc. It will be more kind of presentation style and then panel discussion. Then our project is joining the Data Spaces Symposium event. It's an event which is taking place in Germany, in Darmstadt. And this is our kind of biggest community event when it comes to the other sectoral data spaces. And we will make sure that we will also share our updates from the project with the other ongoing data space projects. And then the last two events in April, there is the EGU General Assembly. I think this community is very familiar with the EGU. We have been there also last year with a very great success, you know, sharing the updates and just the key objectives of the project. So still officially, maybe the others can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have the final dates of our sessions, but we have submitted some sessions for the EGU. So please try to check the updates either on our website or on LinkedIn page, because we will let you know soon which are the sessions that we will be running in Vienna. And then to close officially, as sadly, this project will come to an end at the end of April. We are organizing an event in Brussels to close the event, where we would like to invite our community of practice, the key use cases, you know, everyone who ever contributed to the success of this project. So the place will be in at the Press Club of Brussels, so close to the European Commission. And in case some of you cannot join, but you would be still interested to hear, you know, how we are closing the project, you will be able to follow everything online. So these are the events, and I can see that the numbers are really going down. So I'm super sorry for that. So throughout the webinar, you know, the question about the deployment or what are the next steps coming up from our side came up. So after an internal discussion with the consortium, and we reached a common agreement that today in the stakeholder forum, we would like to communicate to our community of practice this possibility of expression of interest. Of course, this is related to the deployment. So the next phase of the Green Deal data space, you can use the QR code and fill out this form, where we are just asking, you know, basic information from you, you know, what is your organization? How do you see that you could contribute to the deployment, or what will be the role that you can see for yourself? Super important, or as a disclaimer, I really would like to highlight that this is not an official commitment. This is something that we are opening up our doors as a consortium to our community. So filling out the form doesn't mean that we will get directly in touch with you. This is something that we would like to monitor in case, you know, there are interested entities, organizations, partners who would like to be part of the deployment. And I have seen also in the chat that there were questions regarding the funding format. Everything is publicly available on the Commission's website. So you can see what is the format that is proposed by the Commission. So this is something that we are going to follow. And yeah, in case you have questions, you can contact me directly, or you have also the contact details for the generic email address of the project on our website. I don't know if the others managed to share also the links maybe in the chat while I was speaking. And let me know in case there are questions. Okay, I can see people are leaving basically. Okay, and maybe with that, I will close the event. If you all agree, I don't know if there are any final burning remarks. No, okay, that's good. So I would like to thank everyone, all the speakers, firstly, of course, the consortium, also the community of practice. I think this has been a great journey. We started from scratch. As you know, the Green Deal data space was coming. It was a new idea. Already you can see that this field is very hard to define. We had to pick some policy areas, etc. So already seeing over 100 participants today was a great success from my point of view. And of course, I would like to thank also Johan Bodenkamp, our policy officer, who joined today and followed the discussion. His support throughout the project was really, really appreciated. Furthermore, we also had our relationship manager from the Data Space Support Center, and they have been also contributing to the success of this project. And yes, I would like to also thank to our RUSIs, how we call them, so also the use cases and the initiatives. Their input and the time that they invested the project was something that we really needed, and we truly appreciate the effort and everything that they have done to us. So I hope it was useful for everyone. And my screen disappeared. So thanks everyone. We will be sharing the recordings of the stakeholder forum in case you would like to share with your colleagues. So all the materials, meaning the presentations, we will publish on the website, and the recording will be published on our YouTube channel. But all the updates, as usual, are always also shared on our LinkedIn page. So thank you everyone, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.